Are you speaking conceptually? Go ahead. Crimea is Putin's linchpin, the blue dream of Putin's rosy childhood. The Ukrainian armed forces are bringing our Crimea back home. The land corridor to the temporarily occupied peninsula has effectively been cut off for the Russian army.
Ukraine is disrupting Russia's logistics. Kyiv has blocked Russia's land corridor to Crimea. Massive attacks by Ukrainian strike drones on the Rostov-Jankoy highway have forced the occupiers to halt cargo traffic through the Jankoy checkpoint. It is reported that fuel tankers and army trucks regularly come under attack.
Yes, this very vital logistical artery, I'm talking about the same land corridor, Kisa, has now become a road of death for the Russian forces. Glory to the armed forces of Ukraine.
Once a rear and safe logistical artery for the occupiers, the Taganrog-Melitopol highway has turned into a graveyard for fuel tankers. Vehicles are burning 150 kilometers from the front line, which is why the occupiers in Crimea and southern Ukraine have been forced onto a fuel diet.
Oh, the fuel diet in temporarily occupied Crimea and across Russia itself? That's a whole separate big topic. You know, oil refineries and fuel tankers aren't burning for nothing. Oh, definitely not for nothing.
Dear residents of Sevastopol, throughout the evening and morning, I held emergency meetings regarding the fuel supply situation in the city. To avoid unnecessary panic, just like last time, we are introducing a measure that has already proven effective. Fuel sales at TES network gas stations will be limited to 20 liters per vehicle or per canister until the situation finally stabilizes.
No, it sounds very nice, of course, but what does this gasoline chaos look like in practice? And like this.
Alupka, there is no gasoline. Gas station Chris test. There is no gasoline. Yalta, Tatneft is also without gasoline. Yalta, the filling formula also does not contain gasoline.
Like I said, the gasoline collapse isn't just in Crimea, but also in the so-called Great Oil pseudo-empire itself. Here you go, see for yourself. Look, people in Ryazan are searching en masse for AI 95 gasoline all over the city. Residents of Ryazan have started complaining to the governor about the disappearance of 95th gasoline at gas stations. At some gas stations, drivers are only being offered 100 octane gasoline, reports KP Ryazan. So again, what does this whole collapse look like in real life? Let me show you.
Now I'll show you something that will excite not only real men, but also girls, women, moms and dads. Everyone. Ready? Bam! What is this? This is the absence of fuel.
Yes, and here's what the patriotic Russians are writing in their Telegram channels. It's a real pleasure to read. In Alexandro-Nevsky, the prices are posted at the gas station, but there's no gasoline. I was there recently. Gasoline prices are rising, so everything else will become more expensive, even faster. Today I stopped by the gas station at Kudryavtseva. They only have 100 octane. The rest requires special cards and is for organizations only. In short, this is a disaster. Now we'll have to start refining 80 octane gasoline by the capful.
Fuel crisis in Russia. There is no more gasoline available only by ration cards, and in very short supply at gas stations.
But let's get back to what's happening in Crimea. The land corridor, which has already become a road of death for Russians, and now even those who betrayed Ukraine are whining about the loss of this corridor. Do you remember that notorious war criminal named Saldo? Well, the Kremlin-appointed occupation leader of the temporarily seized part of the Kherson region, Vladimir Saldo, has announced the introduction of significant and severe restrictions on the movement of freight transport on the P280 Novorossiya highway. Quotes. This road is part of the key supply route for Russian troops to the temporarily occupied Crimea. He officially published the text of the corresponding decree on his own Telegram channel on May 22nd. But that's not all. Listen and watch.
The demilitarization of occupied Crimea is going according to plan. Over the past few months, Ukraine's defense forces have delivered hundreds of effective strikes against the positions of Russian occupiers on the peninsula.
Well, now Saldo has really hit the jackpot. You know, now he's hated in Ukraine, well, obviously because he's a traitor. And now people in Russia itself can't stand him either. Do you know why? Because he's just Saldo. It's like an insult. Vladimir Saldo has decided to partially close the land corridor to Crimea for trucks. See, the war correspondents have already accused him of working for Ukraine. So well, now it's clear about Saldo, there's nothing more to discuss. Let's really dive deep into the topic of how, and exactly thanks to what the armed forces of Ukraine are dismantling and destroying the enemy's air defense in Crimea, just well, utterly to smithereens. I can't put it any other way.
First, the drone operators took out the radar and air defense systems. Then, starting from the spring of 26, they switched to striking airfields with Iskanders and other missile systems.
Even the Zed fanatics are whining now, saying that Crimea is indeed returning to its native harbor, to its Ukrainian native harbor.
it can be stated that what we initially feared has happened. The peninsula's air defense system suffered heavy damage from systematic drone strikes using Starlink, after which Ukrainian drones began targeting other objectives such as Bastion coastal missile systems and long-range multiple rocket launchers.
And here's another devastating piece of news for the Kremlin and personally for Putin. Like it or not, deal with it, you not-so-pretty Russian girl.
Russia has now lost all access to assets valued at almost $1.5 billion.
To be perfectly honest with you, I was completely caught off guard myself when I first heard about this. I know about it, but honestly, this is all a bit overwhelming to process.
And do you know what this is, friends? This is a greeting from Kazakhstan. Astana doesn't want to be friends with Moscow. So, as a matter of fact, Kazakhstan is now really beginning to help Kiev. And that's encouraging.
And the reason for all this is a decision by a Kazakh court which allows for the forced recovery of money from Gazprom in favor of Ukraine's Naftogaz. The decision didn't come out of nowhere. It's a continuation of the dispute between the Ukrainian and Russian companies that began back in 2022.
Well, the Kremlin is simply in shock over this. And it's not just Putin who's silent, but also all those Solovyovs, Skabivas, Popovs, all those tame media parrots. Well, that's right, keep quiet. Your job is to stay silent and pay up to settle all your debts.
The recent news that Astana is helping Ukraine seize the assets of Russia's main source of income has caught the Kremlin off guard. So much so, in fact, that not even the regime's talking heads have publicly commented on Kazakhstan's decision yet.
Friends, that's all for today. Subscribe to the UNN YouTube channel. Ukraine will prevail. Take care.
There will no longer be a safe Azov region for the Russian occupiers. The defense forces have fire control over temporarily occupied Mariupol. Ukrainian drones are terrifying the occupation army and forcing the enemy to flee from temporarily occupied Crimea. Learn more about this in the following report. The First Corps of the National Guard of Ukraine, Azov, has published a video showing targets being struck near the Russian border in the vicinity of temporarily occupied Mariupol. Ukrainian drones are successfully attacking Russian military equipment, disrupting the enemy's logistics. The footage captures combat operations on the Mariupol-Taganrog and Mariupol-Volnovaka roads. The press service of the First Corps of Azov notes,
"The territory of Ukraine must be free from Russian troops. The most reliable way to achieve this is to move the buffer zone for enemy logistics closer to Russia itself and the occupied Crimea."
Earlier, pilots from the First Corps of the National Guard Azov demonstrated the operation of reconnaissance strike complexes in Mariupol and announced that they were patrolling roads up to 160 kilometers from the line of combat engagement. Strikes were carried out on the so-called Novorossiya highway. Logistics is increasingly becoming the main vulnerability of the Russian army. Even the Russians admit that the land corridor to temporarily occupied Crimea is under Ukraine's fire control. The occupation authorities have officially restricted and limited the movement of civilian freight transport towards Crimea on the federal highway R280, further explaining that these measures are being introduced to guarantee and maintain the safety of transit road traffic. As reported by RIA Yug, with the Ukrainian armed forces now being fully equipped with middle strike class drones, there are essentially no remaining safe routes left for Russian military forces in southern Ukraine. Burning fuel trucks and destroyed military vehicles are regularly observed along the key highways of the occupied territories.
On the Melitopol bypass and at key junctions, truck drivers see cabins burned to the ground and tankers torn in half. There is information that the occupiers have already been forbidden to move military equipment in convoys. Now they try to slip through one by one or transport cargo for the Russian army in civilian trucks.
The defense forces are also successfully striking their legitimate targets on the territory of temporarily occupied Crimea, and with the development of Ukrainian drone production, hitting targets in the aggressor country will become even easier. As reported by Dennis Steilerman, the chief designer at Firepoint, after modernization, the FP2 drone received an increased warhead weighing 200 kilograms and now has a strike range of up to 370 kilometers. Now this UAV will be able to reach any target in occupied Crimea. At the same time, the defense forces continue to regain control over Ukrainian territories. As reported recently by the spokesperson of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, Serhiy Brachuk, the armed forces of Ukraine have completely cleared the settlement of Stepnohirsk and thwarted the Russians' plans to shell the city of Zaporizhzhia.
Thanks to our special forces, particularly the Artan Special Unit of the Main Intelligence Directorate, the defense forces managed to regain control over Stepnohirsk and reclaim our tactical positions that had been lost there.
According to data from the Institute for the Study of War, Mala Tokmashka in the Zaporizhzhia region has also been liberated. In addition, Ukraine's defense forces have regained control over the village of Otradne in the Kharkiv region and the surrounding areas.